It's here, the new CAT306. I'm gonna pull it off here. This is the new toy. I bought this so that I could replace my two skid steers, my little mini excavator that had the wheels on it. This thing I've had now, I've been using it, I want to say I've got roughly close to 60 hours on it, and this thing's awesome. The biggest downside that I found, and this was pretty apparent right away, the undercarriage on an excavator is less robust than the undercarriage on a skid steer. So you can see this is the RT210, how short it is, and then it's very wide. You have low ground pressure. What this does, and it's got this triangle where the drive motor's up higher, and all that combined makes for much more torque and the ability to spin easier, like skid back and forth on your tracks. With an excavator, there's a lot going against it for its maneuverability and how quick it is. One is its weight. So this has a 59 horsepower motor and it weighs 15 or 16,000 pounds. That has a 72 horsepower motor and it weighs about 10,000 pounds. So the amount of horsepower per weight is much different on an excavator. The second thing here is these tracks are really long. Spin on these things, it takes a lot more effort. You can use your arm and your bucket to push down and lift up and turn, or you just take the turn slower. But you have a lot less horsepower to drive a lot bigger tracks that are a lot longer and have a machine that's a lot heavier. What's awesome though about the excavator is that 59 horsepower that I do have goes primarily to the hydraulics in the arm. So this thing is much stronger and can lift a lot more than that thing, even at full extension. This thing's got really high capacity, and I'll put those up on the screen here because I don't remember all of them off the top of my head. I can pick up more with this thing at full extension than I could with that thing close by. So that's pretty nice. And that's what all that extra weight gets you and all that extra hydraulic power in the arms gets you. The other downside of switching fully to an excavator is the speed. This thing is like 3 miles per hour-ish top speed. That thing's like 8. So it takes me a lot longer to go from place to place. However, I'm able to go to a place and park in one spot, kind of just sit there and then spin around and do everything I can with an excavator. So I tear things up a lot less, and I'm able to reach over things, reach over walls, reach when you're on a ridge to grab like a buckthorn that's down below a cliff. This thing's got a pretty good reach. I can go like 10, 15 feet down to grab something like that, where I have zero option to get that with the skid steer. This thing can handle all of the skid steer attachments. So there is this extra tool carrier on the front here. It works just like a skid steer, quick attach, and then you plug in your hydraulics back here. All that said, I think that this is not going to be just like a skid steer. So if you think this extra tool carrier is going to replace skid steer capability, it won't. One, it doesn't lift very high, so you really have to use a 4-in-1 bucket to make this useful. Two, you can kind of see, like, I'm a little nervous. I've been doing work around in the woods, but all these hydraulic hoses are very exposed and they're out in the open and get caught on stuff. So you really have to make sure you've cleared where you're going through. You can't just drive over top of bushes and things like that. They can get up underneath here and get caught up in these hoses and maybe do some damage. As far as strength goes though, this thing lifts pretty well. Similar strength to a skid steer as far as lift capacity, unless you are talking about a really big skid steer like the 210 or bigger. The other thing about this that is not the best for replacing your skid steer and all of its attachments, as I'm finding out, is the height of your attachment and the boom here when you swing around. If you have this thing like all the way up and curled back, this hydraulic piston here and the boom itself can hit into the attachment. So the attachments that come from CAT, I think, are all sort of designed to account for that, so that you don't crash into your attachment with your boom, because that would be bad, or with maybe the counterweight, the back, if you're spinning all the way around. One thing I need to do is find out which attachments are going to have the most trouble with this. If I walk down here, the 6-way blade I think would be kind of neat to put on the front. The biggest challenge I'm going to have is this thing has one of these switches here that changes your tilt and the angle of the blade and all that stuff. So you need to be able to switch a button in the cab to shift that. And it's got this like solenoid down here. On that CAT, they don't have a remote plug with the switch in the cab that you can hook this control panel to this. Because if you think about it, the whole cab is spinning around on top of the undercarriage. And so that cord will just spin around and get ripped up. So there's really no wire harness that connects down below that I found yet. So I'm probably gonna have to do some sort of wireless switch connection to this solenoid down here so that, you know, I'll have to use a battery on the attachment or something to power it. That one will be neat. I don't think I'll have any clearance issues. The trencher should be fine too. And I can do trenching to, you know, I'll have to see what the range is, get some videos on this, but I don't think I can tip it down as far as I could with the skid steer, but I can use this on the arm of the excavator as well. So that shouldn't be a big deal. The one attachment that I had the highest hopes for was this Wallenstein on the excavator, because I can kind of use the excavator as a skidder. After some use of the excavator, what I talked about earlier with the speed problems and, you know, just it's not as powerful with the undercarriage and moving things around. I don't know if this is realistic. And so the Wallenstein may just be used on the back of the tractor or something as a skidder, but we'll see. My forks that I have here have a big issue. See how tall this guard is on them? So I actually had to get another set of forks from CAT to put on the front of the excavator in the XTC location, because this is what I'm talking about. Like attachments this tall, you will smack into them when you're rotating around and stuff, depending upon their location. And you just have to be real careful with what you use on the front. The rock bucket probably won't get much use on the CAT, but I'll probably use that on the tractor. So I'm kind of switching from skid steers in the tractor to one excavator and this loader tractor. And I'm hopeful that I can make everything work. The tree shear up there wouldn't really work well on the front of the excavator because of that high cage, but it could work on the excavator arm. This puller would be fine, but I don't need it anymore because of the thumb. I can just grab things with the arm here. This little device down here is really neat. It's what allows me to hook skid steer attachments to the arm. So this has a quick coupler on it. I can just hook to this and pick up skid steer attachments and use them. And the remotes all work fine. So I'm able to use skid steer attachments on both the XTC area and the arm here. I'm really starting to become a big fan of CATs because of the ease of maintenance. They make everything so easy to maintain and check on before you use the machine, like every time. Everything's accessible. Like here's the pump. So if you ever had a problem with your hydraulic pump, heck, I could just get out my impact driver and take this thing off right here without even having to have much special equipment or anything. Everything is accessible. If I open all this stuff up, it's all labeled. Everything's labeled, which is really cool. Like every little cord and hose is labeled with what its function is. So it's pretty neat. This is the manifold for the hydraulic valves. This is where all the hydraulic ranges of motion come from. And look how easy it is to just access this. If I had to replace a hose, you could do all that here. And the filters are all right here and everything. The radiators are all really easy to get to. The filters are easy to get to. The air filter, the batteries right here, all really nicely laid out, fuses, all that stuff. And these panels all open up nicely and then they hold themselves open, so you don't have to worry about them crashing back on you. To me, this kind of access is so nice because you can just take better care of your machine when it's easy, and you can do a lot of stuff yourself too, which is what I really like, because I don't like having to rely so much on a dealer for every little thing. So let's take a look inside the cab here. One of the coolest things about this is the computer, the touchscreen here. It's a big touchscreen, which is really nice. Still getting used to everything. Most of the time I just have the backup camera on the screen, on the display. When you go to your home screen, you have the backup camera as your default, and you can see like you get your radio. If you want to jump to the radio real quick, you just touch on the radio, and then you've got all of the buttons and your presets and things like that. So I'll go back. But this thing's pretty slick. So this stick steer, I have the hydraulics off right now, but the stick steer is this yellow button here, and then it will drive just like a normal skid steer. And this right handle will then control the bucket down there. And this is I got the 4-in-1 bucket on it with this XTC. I also have some pallet forks for it that I'm going to try out. Okay, so I got this kind of over the shoulder here so you can kind of see how everything works. My left stick over here, you can barely see it on the screen. And the hydraulics are enabled. This machine's warmed up now. Let me just pull this thing over. Some cool things on here. This thumb wheel on the right side activates your thumb. And here, let me move the boom over so you can kind of see, but it activates the thumb. And you can also have a second primary aux hydraulic attachment, which is like your thumb, or on the end of the stick there's a way to plug in like a skid steer couplers to some other attachment. You just turn the thumb off manually because there's a splitter. You close off the thumb part, and then whenever you use this right wheel, it will control your attachment. On the left side, this thumb wheel swings the boom. It's the boom swing. And then if you press these like little arrows that are cycling, it switches to your aux 2. So there's another set of hydraulics. And what I found that useful for is when I had the tilt coupler on it, setting it up so that the tilt on the coupler was on aux 2. So then if I use this thumb wheel, I could control my boom and then just press the button and control the tilt at the same time. And now I didn't lose access to my thumb. When you're in excavator mode, this little joystick over on the right side just lifts the front bucket up and down. When you turn on stick steer mode, you get this warning thing that says, hey, do you want to enable stick steer? It only does it one time each time you've got the machine running. So once you've started up and done that okay once, every time you press this button, you just hear a beep, an audible beep to let you know you're switching back and forth. There's a little icon up here that tells you that it's excavator mode. When I press this, there's this green looking thing with arrows that shows you stick steer. So when I'm in stick steer, I'm gonna crank up the thrust here. I can control the whole thing with this left stick over here. And then on this side, it performs like a skid steer. So to lift up, you pull back. To lift down, you push forward. And then your curl on your bucket is in and out. And then this thumb wheel switches to so right now it's a 4-in-1 bucket, and it switches to opening and closing. So you can drive this thing like a skid steer. The one downside I've noticed is that the boom's kind of in the way, so you need to really get that out of the way. When you're in stick steer mode, you use this thumb wheel, the whole thing, the whole cab rotates. So that's one of the things I'm trying to get used to, is like if I'm in stick steer mode, I kind of want to get this boom out of the way sometimes just so I can see better. And I have to switch back and forth between excavator skid steer mode. This thing does have cruise control, so when you're in stick steer, there's a button underneath this left joystick, and I found that to be really nice when you're going a really long way, because with this long driveway, it takes about 20 minutes because this thing does about a little over 3 miles an hour in its top speed. So it's significantly slower than my skid steer, which does around 7 to 8 miles an hour. The excavator, it's more of a crawl to where you want to go and then sit and then kind of pick around with your boom and the arm. I have to get used to that because the goal behind this machine was to replace 2 skid steers in my wheeled excavator, and so far I love this thing because it's just so much nicer to remove buckthorn and I have been getting used to the stick steer mode. I'm kind of going back and forth a lot between the excavator. So if I'm in cleaning buckthorn, I will switch between the modes a lot. If I need to like use the bucket to maybe grab something because it's a 4-in-1, or to plow things out of the way, I will, you know, switch to stick steer mode, and then I can control that bucket like a normal skid steer. You do have to watch out in the woods when you're doing that you've got this really big arm sticking up in the air, and if you're in your like skid steer mindset, you forget about that thing up there, so you can crash into limbs and things like that. I'm just going to remove a few buckthorn and just sort of show you how I use these controls when I'm in here. Let me just air my seat up here. This has the air seat on it. And I've got the ripper on it, and I found that this ripper is so much nicer for getting these huge buckthorns out, and you don't tear up things quite as much. I'm on a rocky hilltop here, so I've got a lot of rocks everywhere, and this area was almost impossible to get into with the skid steer because you would get hung up on rocks, and the rocks can get caught in your tracks, and you can, you know, have your tracks come off pretty easy. So this excavator is nice because I can just kind of go down the top of the ridge and reach over on the sides to grab the buckthorn. So I'll just kind of show you how this works. I'm just going to go from right here, put my bucket down for stability. I will note that like having a bucket up front is much nicer than a blade for stability, because it's a big flat area that just, I don't know, I feel like it gets so much more. The other cool thing is you can add ballast to the machine by filling your bucket up with dirt or something. So you can get a bunch of dirt in there, lower the bucket, you've got a lot more weight on the ground, and it holds you in place, because this thing's plenty powerful, especially with this ripper on this. This thing will take out really large trees. So I kind of just, with these big buckthorns, I kind of hit them on one side, and then push them over a little bit, and then curl the tooth underneath the root. So I've got some video of me with a better camera angle. If you're going to get a ripper or something, get one that's made for your excavator. Okay, so it looks like, all right, so if you hear the motor cycle up and down, this thing has auto idle enabled on it. So like I can keep my power up, but as soon as I stop, it throttles down, and it just saves a ton of fuel. I've been driving this thing I put about 20 hours on it, and I only used 15 gallons in 20 hours, and I've been out working in the woods. I've been doing lots of driving up and back with it, so it's very fuel efficient. It's got a 59 horsepower motor. So let's back this up. Another nice thing is there's this travel alarm mute button over here, which I use all the time because I'm out on my own property by myself, and I don't really need to have these beeps going off constantly, so I can just press that. And the one thing I wish it did was, I'm gonna swing this boom while I'm backing up here so I can go around this tree. I wish this travel alarm would stay off. Like you could mute it once and it would stay off. But the problem with it is every time I stop the stick, like let go, start again, it starts up and I have to press that mute button again. It's just, you know, it's not the end of the world, but it's kind of annoying. So I don't know if you can see that, but I got this big log caught up in all this buckthorn here, so I'm just gonna put this stuff all over here. But yeah, I would recommend, if you have an excavator and you want to clear in the woods, I've been finding this ripper is really nice. Get something that is made for your machine, because these rippers can hit the, if they're too long, they can hit your main boom cylinder here. The other thing is with this extra tool carrier on the front, with any sort of attachments, you can also smack into that as well. And I've already done that once with this ripper on here. The bucket's a little shorter and I haven't had any issues with crashing into stuff, but this thing is it's a CAT ripper. It's made for this machine and it actually seems to work well. The other thing, if you get the ripper and the thumb from the same company, you can see how they line up nicely, so you don't have any binding. That's one thing I noticed when I had this tilt rotator on here, or not the tilt rotator, but the tilt coupler. It made it really long, and then everything was much longer. It would crash into the boom easier. The thumb wouldn't close right on the bucket, so the thumb doesn't even work with the tilt coupler. So I just got rid of that thing. It just wasn't going to work for me, and I'm using a tilting bucket instead. So I got this now. I don't know if you can tell that there's like, it's splitting. Some of these things split because the roots hang on one side more than the other, so they'll just split apart. Makes it that much harder to pull these things out. So now I got this, and I kind of just try to lay them perpendicular to me, and then I can put this tooth over like that, and it just curls under, and it's just really nice. It kind of acts like a grapple. With the ripper, you only have like these 3 points of contact, so the tree can kind of rotate between like this, and it doesn't twist your arm. So I find this like a lot easier on the machine to have this ripper on here. Plus just digging force and everything like that with these rocks, you can't get into these root systems very easily with the bucket on here without just like constantly bouncing up and down. And what's really nice about this machine is it's real smooth. I've got everything slowed down to its slowest setting on my joystick controls, because I'm not an expert at doing this, driving an excavator, especially something like this. I had a wheeled one. That thing was like out of the Stone Age compared to this guy. As I get the hang of it, I might speed up the joysticks a little bit, but right now I got them set to their slowest setting. And I found that this size, this is a CAT306, and it's considered I think it's a 6 ton, considered a 6 ton, but it weighs 15,000 pounds. This size excavator is perfect for me, because one, I don't have to move it a lot, so it's 15,000 pounds. So if you have to move your excavator a lot for work or whatever, maybe you want something lighter, I don't know. But as far as like working in the woods here, even these buckthorns, like this one over here, that one's probably 7 inches diameter. They're not heavy trees, but the root balls can be heavy. So let's just kind of see how big this root ball is here. So kind of scoop to the side and you see the thing tilt. See, even this 15,000 pound machine with the ripper on it goes up in the air, and I'm off to the side a little bit. I'm not exactly sideways on this thing. I'm off to the front corner, which is supposed to be a pretty strong area to work off of. But you can see that any machine that would be smaller would be a little, might be a little too light for a lot of this forestry work. So if you're doing forestry work like this, and this guy's a beast, he's not wanting to go anywhere, so I might have to rip him on both sides. Okay, there he goes. He's falling now. Yeah, this part up here is this is a challenging environment. All these rocks, the roots grow into these rocks, and it's really, you can kind of hear that rip or scraping on these rocks. Okay, there we go. So this was the main roots were on the other side of the tree. So sometimes you got to kind of scratch on both sides just to see how it works. We did that thing where it split again. It splits down the trunk. You miss any little bit of root, it can just split on you. Now I got to clean that part up too, because believe it or not, stuff will grow off of that split root, that split trunk. And this guy's big. Yeah, I mean, this thing's easily 30 feet. They're about the only things that grow well up here other than cedar trees. But each one of these I take out, the whole view shed just changes up here. It's pretty amazing. This has been the best machine I've had for my war on invasives. So I have to say, one of the coolest things about this machine is this front window. You have a side door obviously to get in and out of, but this front window tilts, slides, and goes up in the ceiling. And I think some of the skid steers do this. I think the Takeuchis do this too. This is really nice because you get fresh air. You can hear and see things better, what you're working on. I will say, if you're working in the woods though, you're gonna need these cages. These cages are provided by CAT. They were an add-on, and they cover the front and the top, and they have little clasps on them that you can release and open them up to clean things out. It's very important. I've already had limbs and things like when you pull in towards you, sometimes they'll snap, break, or fall and tip and hit into the front here, and this cage has already saved my glass twice already in just one day. Having it on the top is nice too, because you're in an excavator, your arm, the thing you're working on is further out in front of you. Where a skid steer, if you're working under a tree, you're like under the tree and things are falling on top of you. So this thing, you're kind of away from it, so when things fall, they usually are falling in front of you or around you. They're not falling on the machine. One thing that made me nervous when I first got this is all the glass in this thing. I mean, there's glass down here, there's glass here, there's even little bits of glass up here. And these are all separate pieces of glass. There's a glass sunroof, glass front door. There's a lower glass window that you can open, which is neat to get ventilation in here. There's a lower glass window down here, one here on the door, and then it just goes around. I mean, it's kind of scary because look, this frame is built into the glass. I assume if I break this thing here, this whole window would have to be mounted, because this all looks like it's one unit. In the back here, huge glass window. I still got my plastic on my headrest, probably need to get that off. This cab is super nice. I got a heated seat. One thing I don't really understand is in these machines, and this isn't just this machine, every machinist that I have, the cup holders never fit anything. How many construction guys or anybody doing work in these big machines have cups that are smaller than this? You know, like most people have these big cups now. I mean, these cup holders don't fit anything other than a can. They don't hold these big coffee thermoses or water jugs or anything like that anymore. So that's one thing that definitely could be improved. There is a little spot here for a cell phone. Over on this side, there's another little cubby down here. That's about it. And then behind the seat, there's a spot for the operating manual. There's really no storage space in this thing, like hardly any, which is kind of annoying. I got enough to like have my phone and everything, and then there is a coat hook up here, and that's about it. On the outside of this machine, there is no real good storage either, and that's kind of a problem because like I like to have a chainsaw, the grease gun, you know, other things with me so I can work in the woods when I need to, hop in and out, and I like to carry it kind of with me, and like a log chain, stuff like that. There's just no place for it, and I can put things in this bucket, which is nice to have the bucket there, but they get dirty quickly if you leave them on while you're working, so you really have to take them out and set them off to the side if you're working. So this is going to be one of the larger buckthorn trees that I've removed, not just with this thing, but just in general. This thing is huge and it's got, you know, multiple trunks, but each one of these guys is big. I would say these are like 10-inch main trunks here, and they all kind of go together, and that's probably like a close to 20-inch base on that thing. I'm gonna put this camera here and take out this big buckthorn over here and this big one right here in the middle of all these trees. Really opens it up here. I'm not gonna lie, that was a little scary. That was a big one. But you can see how this, you can really break the thing apart, stack it nicely, and then I'll have a fire. But that was one of the largest buckthorns I've ever removed. Put up a fight. I had to get in the right position. One of the tough things about this area is the steepness of the slope. So it's harder to see on camera, but it drops way down over there quickly. So yeah, I was able to get all this cleaned out. It looks good. Can now see better up here. Got some more big ones right there to take out, and I'm just kind of working my way. I can make it to about where those cedars are down there, and then I'll be at the point. This was the other big one I took out here, and what's nice is I was able to get this thing pulled out here and not harm these cedar trees here. So they all stayed intact, as did this hickory, and they didn't fall over. We just have a little bit further to go, making our way out here to the point. And that one buckthorn made this huge pile right here. So you can see this is just one shoot of it. It's pretty big. This was the furthest I could get my skid steer when I cleared this area before. There's some big rocks here that you get beached on with the skid steer, and then it drops off both sides. And I'd love to get some of these big buckthorns out that are in here, but I'll probably have to just chainsaw those. See kind of what I'm fighting for here. I get through this mess. There's the excavator. Get through that, and then got a nice little trail here that'll take you on real quick. I'll have to stop back there, but once I'm there, these cedars keep everything nice. There's some buckthorns here that need to come out. Some really cool rock outcroppings up here. We call this area Castle Camp. You'll see why in a second. I've cleared up here before, but things are starting to grow back already. I did treat some of these stumps, and they are dead, thankfully. But yeah, here's what it looks like. Castle Camp. Got some cool rock outcroppings that go all over the place. There's a little kind of overhang cave back there. I'll probably do another video on this place some point, but walk around here, all these neat things, and let's just take a walk up through and get to our lookout here. So yeah, there we go. Here's our big lookout. See way down there, there's the big CAT303. Yeah, big drop-offs here. Go straight down. Yeah, so I want this place to be more accessible so we can just kind of hike down here from the new house and be able to sit and look at this nice view. Thanks for watching.